Here outside London's St Paul's Cathedral, thousands have gathered to get a glimpse of Baroness Thatcher's funeral. Thousands line the streets today to say goodbye to the UK's first female Prime Minister. Inside the Church of England Cathedral, more than 2,000 guests arrived to pay tribute to Margaret Thatcher. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamín Netanyahu and dignitaries representing over 170 countries attended, as well as the Queen.
The service was quite remarkable. It had beautiful choral songs. The coffin was brought through, held by soldiers. There were many, many important people. I'm not surprised that Mr. Netanyahu was there, because Margaret Thatcher is probably one of the most supportive pro-Israel prime ministers we have ever had in this country.
Her coffin, draped in a Union Jack flag, left Westminster at 10 a.m. and was carried from St Clement Danes Chapel. It was then transferred to a gun carriage, accompanied by over 700 war veterans, including Falklands veterans. The ceremonial funeral featured nearly the same level of pomp and honour afforded to Princess Diana.
I came to pay my respects. I mean, she was a great lady, and I'm a Thatcher child, if you like, and I benefit from her rule.
I've come from Amersham to pay my respects to the Honourable Lady Thatcher, who's obviously passed away, which is very sad in my opinion. And I'd like to thank her for giving me my finest hour, which was down the Falklands in 1982. She put that medal on my chest, and I've come here to pay my respects to her.
10 million for a funeral?
Fair enough. She saved the country a damn sight more than £10 million.
But Britain's longest-serving Prime Minister of the 20th century is often referred to as a divisive figure because of the controversial policies she put into motion during her time in office. This was reflected by the presence of protesters who expressed criticism at the estimated £10 million budget of the funeral.
They should show respect to someone who is dead, but this amount of money in this austerity measure, I think it's a waste of taxpayers' money.
I don't believe that it's right that the taxpayers are paying £10 million for this funeral, and there have been so many cuts to the arts funding and uni fees, when we're paying these ridiculous amounts for uni fees that we're now paying Thatcher's funeral.
Mrs Thatcher, has her place in history. But she did a huge amount of damage to many of the people I represent, and I think we're still suffering from the legacy of her policies today. The fact is that the deregulation of our financial markets, which was probably necessary at the time, but the deregulation of the banks led to the crisis of 2008, where banks overstretched themselves because they simply weren't regulated.
Don't forget that the Labour Party, there was a lot of money. There was no recession in the early years, but the problem is the Labour Party spent all our money. They didn't save it, and she transformed our country. We were going bankrupt. The IMF were saying they were going, that Britain was over. It was over for the United Kingdom. And if you look at my constituency, if you look at the country as a whole, she gave millions of people the right to buy their own property.
The sad thing is there are people in the Jewish community for whom she could do no wrong and still is a great hero. But there are many who saw the consequences of her policies, which divided the UK, destroyed our manufacturing industry, and I think that was a very sad legacy, frankly.
Following the service, 2 receptions were held, one for family and close friends, and another for foreign state representatives. The Baroness's final resting place is to be that of the Royal Hospital Cemetery, next to her husband, Dennis. Despite being a controversial figure, just by being here, many have witnessed a part of history. This is Celestina Ololode for JN1 in London.